Okay, good morning. My name is Gene Chan, hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk of this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet. So if you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice, urbanforestry@sfdpw.org. This public hearing is being held to consider 3 items. Order number 206632, to consider an appeal for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 2739 Octavia Street. Order number 206635, to consider an appeal for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 298 Cordova Street. Order number 206636, to consider an appeal for the fine issued for illegal removal of 2 street trees adjacent to 30 Chavez Avenue. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make a determination. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make the final determination. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows. I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow the property owner or representative to speak. Then any member of the public who wants to speak. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. I will call on you to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you are a member of the public who wants to speak, please wait for me to call for public comments. Then use Zoom's raise your hand feature if you're on a computer to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you are dialing in on your phone, dial *9 to indicate you're raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you. If on your phone and you're muted, press *6 to unmute yourself. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to the department by the end of this hearing at urbanforestry@sfdpw.org. We will now begin the hearing. Order number 206632. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
Please remember item number 2 for the public comment. Can you hear me? If there is anyone in the public that has anything to say that is not related to the hearing and would like it to be recorded, now is the time for you to raise your hand and to make that comment. That would be item number 2 on the agenda.
Thank you, Cerise.
I don't see any hands at this time, Mr. Chan.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We can start order number 206632 now.
Can everyone see my screen? The Public Works logo, administrative hearing
Yes, we can.
15th. Okay. So my name is Susan Auberry. I'm the representative for Urban Forestry today. And we have 3 cases. So first we have to give a little background for the fine. So there'll be a little presentation, and then we'll do just the intro to each case. So the basis for the fine, Public Works Article 16, the Urban Forestry Ordinance, and specifically Section 808 refers to the protection of trees and landscape material. And it says that injury to or destruction of trees is prohibited. So it's unlawful to intentionally or through gross negligence. So that's kind of the key here. It's intentional or negligent. It's one of the two. You can say you didn't mean to, but if you're being negligent in determining if like what you did was legal, or if you didn't do the due diligence to see if like your pruning or removal is legal. That's kind of how we define gross negligence, is not doing your due diligence to even just check, like, is this okay? And it's unlawful to destroy a street tree, any tree on city property, a significant tree, or a landmark tree. Removal of a tree under city order or removal in accordance with a permit issued to Section 806, 810, or 810A are exempt, which means if you have a permit, it's not any legal removal. So Section 806, and this is about removal permits, and abutting property or desires a permit to remove a street tree shall apply to the department on the designated form. So basically, it shall require that a street tree or trees of equivalent replacement value of the one removed be planted in place of the removed tree or imposed an in lieu fee. So this means if you remove a tree, you're also required to replace it. Construction work, so tree protection is required. This is in our ordinance. That means if you're doing construction work, you have to have tree protection up. So if you knock over a tree, it falls over, do your construction, that's negligent, that's illegal, that's failure to protect trees. So if excavation and construction or a street work is planned within the drip line of a significant tree, a landmark tree, or tree on any street or publicly owned property, it shall be adequately protected. We have tree protection specs that people can email us. We'll send it to them. It's a little spec with orange fencing, and it shows how large the tree protection should be. So if the construction work results in injury or damage to such trees, the responsible parties may be subject to the penalties set forth in Section 811 of this article. And then so we have to define injury, because some people say, like, I didn't injure the tree. Pruning, which in and of itself can kill or cause a tree decline, or severing of all or part of a tree. So just because like the tree sprouts back doesn't necessarily mean you didn't damage the tree. Every time you excessively prune a tree, it has to tap into its starch reserves, and also it sprouts back with really bad structure. So that does ultimately shorten the lifespan of the tree. It forces us to have more frequent maintenance of the tree. So that kind of is the reason why there's a monetary like penalty for the fine. Like, it replaces the tree eventually when, once the tree has had a shortened lifespan. Like, we need funds to replace trees that have been damaged, and to just like restructure trees that have been pruned poorly. So do not remove more than 25% of the tree canopy each year. We actually, if you Google tree pruning, San Francisco tree pruning, our website, it says the first thing that comes up is do not top trees. It's like one of the first Google searches. And so it says like, don't remove more than 25% of the canopy each year. Do not remove more than 25% of the foliage on a branch or a limb each year. This will stress the tree and produce weakly attached branches. So again, if you remove all the canopy, you produce weakly attached branches. So from the outside, it may just look like a big fluffy tree, but the interior structure is often poor. So don't cut back to a branch that is less than 1/3 the size of a main branch. We see people cut the really large branches and leave like the tiny branches, and that's not enough to support the tree. It's important to selectively remove branches throughout the tree, not just the one that's more convenient, and also not just remove the lowest branches and limb up the tree. When you excessively prune a tree and remove limbs that are more evenly distributed throughout the tree, you damage the taper. You have a tall, spindly tree. Those trees just tend to fail more frequently. So again, don't top trees. This is pretty typical top tree. You can see that it has like these large kind of abbreviated cuts. These limbs are just like arbitrarily pruned. They're not pruned to a lateral. They're just these giant stubs. So you see recovery a lot of the time. This is not good necessarily. Like it's good that the tree is still alive, but what's happening here is the tree is tapping into its reserves to produce canopy. Because what people don't understand is pruning a tree isn't a haircut. Like it's not hair. What you've done is you've removed living tissue. There's a process called photosynthesis, and what trees do is they put green leaves, which capture wavelengths from the sun. It helps the tree produce sugars also from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So what you've basically done is removed like its intestines. You're not giving it a haircut. What you're doing is like punching it in the stomach or removing its ability to digest its food. So every time you do that, the tree has to scramble to sprout more leaves in order to be able to photosynthesize. So the more leaves a tree has, the healthier it'll be, because that gives it more ability to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and capture sunlight. So when you repeatedly top a tree, they'll sprout sometimes and then they'll just die because it just didn't have enough starches to keep the tree alive. Sometimes you don't see trees die. Sometimes they have really good vigor. But then what you end up having is this union where the topping cut occurred, and this kind of tangled mess of what were sprouts and then grew to be these large limbs. And you can see that there's decay pockets where like it's kind of brown where these branches are connected. That's why people's trees fail. So people say like, oh, the tree's falling, limbs are falling. It's because the tree was topped. Large trees don't necessarily fail. It's poorly structured trees that fail. So, it's a constant battle educating the public that like having a large tree doesn't necessarily mean that you have a dangerous tree. It's a poorly structured tree that's been topped that's a dangerous tree. The other thing is when you improperly prune trees, you have these decay pockets because they can't compartmentalize decay. Like if you cut a limb just arbitrarily, that's like not a good spot necessarily for the tree to heal. So like large cuts larger than 2 inches, that has more potential to have entry points for decay here. And then you see more branch failures or an entire tree failure as the decay makes its way down to the roots. So yeah, a lot of times people say like, well, like the trees at City Hall, look like this, or the trees on California Street look like this. So the trees on the left are London plane trees. They are pollarded at the nursery, and they have more of a special ability to put on these calluses. There's still not a practice that we're sticking with. Ultimately, like a pollarded tree even has a shorter lifespan than a regular tree, but they don't have this potential for failure the way an arbitrarily topped tree. And again, like these trees are pruned at the nursery where the cuts made are like less than half of an inch, and these calluses develop over time. Whereas the tree on the right, it was just topped as a mature tree. And again, these large cuts are entry points for pathogens. We get a lot of people submitting complaints about a tree touching wires. And PG&E does an annual inventory of all of the power lines. There is the CPUC General Order 95. It's actually Rule 35. It says Rule 38, but it's Rule 35. It requires that utilities maintain a minimum of 18-inch clearance between vegetation and high voltage conductors. They don't just do 18 inches. They prune far more than that so that at any given time, there will be more than 18 inches clearance. This means that the lower lines there, those aren't high voltage. And so there's not a general order about those lines because of the fact that those lines are safe for trees to touch. It's perfectly normal for trees to touch lines. And I will say that like San Francisco is one of the few places where people are extremely concerned about this, where when I worked for PG&E, most people want the lines to be covered by vegetation, but San Francisco is kind of an interesting exception. And I think it's just due to this lack of education with living in urban environments. So again, PG&E will always prune for vegetation, low voltage vegetation, low voltage lines can have vegetation touching it. And then so in 2016, as some people know, we had a ballot measure. It was called Prop E. It's now Street Tree SF. This transferred the maintenance of all of the street trees to the city of San Francisco. It means there's 19 million set aside for street tree maintenance in the general fund that can never be taken away. So in preparation for Street Tree SF, a tree census was completed and it inventoried every single street tree. So we know your tree exists. And then we mapped all of the trees based on priority. So again, kind of what I mentioned before is like some people think their tree needs to be pruned for those lines. Well, we have a professional census with arborists saying like these trees are needing to be pruned for clearance or for structure. But those low voltage lines isn't part of it. And that's why like some people will say like, well, you haven't pruned my tree yet. We may have pruned the tree, but we may not have pruned it the way you thought we were going to prune it because we don't like top trees. And it's important to note that safety is our #1 criteria when prioritizing trees. It's not about like aesthetics. You know, if the tree's touching your window, like I understand that is very annoying. But you know, we have people across the city waiting for their tree to be pruned, so we can't just come and prune people's trees like one off. So we think we're about on a 5-year pruning schedule. Some corridors will be getting more pruning because of species. Yep. So I believe we're beyond this 30,000. We do need to update our metrics, but I think we're more at 60,000 now. We're 5 years into Street Tree SF. So we've removed a lot of at-risk trees because of this. So we are actually doing this work. We may not be in your neighborhood, but the trees, honestly, the neighborhoods with the largest trees and the most density are what's going to get the attention sooner because they have large trees that need more pruning and more work. Again, so our tree pruning schedules at Street Tree SF. This is an older map. Now you can actually click on the map and it'll have like your tree ID number. Yes. So there is a street tree care class. And when you attend, there can be a reduction for a fine issued for illegal pruning or removal. We have a whole rubric for, you know, how that street tree care class will apply. And it'll teach you about the benefits of trees and proper pruning and review Street Tree SF and the ordinance. And the class fee is $197. So by registering for the class and attending it, you then get a reduced fine. Okay, so that's kind of the background for Article 16. I'm sorry that presentation's so long, but it kind of explains why the fines are issued so that we can kind of get through the actual cases. So the first case is Order 206632, 2739 Octavia Street. And it's an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 2739 Octavia. And the fine levied for illegal pruning is $2,230. So it's a Prunus cercifera. In here it has like a fairly full canopy. It's in good condition. It's a smaller street tree, honestly. Like the tree on the left is a ficus, and it'll probably grow to be twice that size, where the Prunus has probably reached its max size. And then the inspector found that it had been completely illegally pruned with 0% canopy left. So remember we said don't remove more than 25% of the canopy. So here 100% of the canopy had been removed. Like ultimately this shortens the lifespan of the tree, and some of the more fine branches are removed, so you're going to have a lot of that sprouting happen. And these are already not the longest lived trees, and this one was actually in pretty good condition. You don't see that very often with these Prunus. They don't do well with drought, but we've had some luck with some of them in the city. And Street Tree SF covers tree pruning and removal, but it doesn't cover replacement. So every time people remove 100% of the canopy of a tree like this, it shortens the lifespan, and that's just another tree that we have to replace. So that's why we issue the fine here. And so to be consistent, we issue the fine for the illegal pruning of one street tree. And that's it for my presentation of Octavia.
Thank you, Susan. May I have the property owner or representative speak now? Please raise your hand.
Hello.
Hi, we
Hi,
can hear you.
Hi, I'd like to share my screen. So how do I do that?
Okay, give me just one moment. I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Thank you, Cerise.
You're welcome.
So hold on. Join as panelist.
And once you come in, you'll need to unmute yourself one more time.
Start video, or I don't know, share
Yes.
screen.
Yes, we can see you. And we
Okay,
can-
yay, hi everyone. Okay, hold on. You see my presentation?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Once-
great.
Once
Okay.
you begin, you'll have 3 minutes.
Great, we can start now. So, hi everyone. I just want to start off with 2 photos of the tree. The one on the left, you've already seen, it was taken last year. The one on the right was taken last week. So you can tell, you can say whatever you want to say, but this tree is still alive and it's thriving. So the background, the tree was planted 25 years ago, and it was regularly pruned up to 2017. And during those 25 years, the tree was never injured from pruning. It fully recovered and it continues to thrive. Last year, when the branches touched the tree, 311 was called to have the tree pruned, but there was never a response. So it's interesting you're on the call, Susan, because I just want to turn your attention to an email from you on January 5th to the person who reported the tree pruning, suggesting that the tree was dead. And this email came from Public Records, and in it you said that Daniel Hoffman will look at the tree and either, number 1, issue a warning if the tree can survive and retain its structure, or number 2, issue a fine if the tree is permanently damaged or if the topping resulted in the tree's death. So you laid out 2 scenarios, warning or fine, depending on the status of the tree. Okay. So here's a screenshot of the email where it clearly states that the fine is to be assessed only if the tree is permanently damaged or dead. So here are some photos of the tree taken on May 6th from different vantage points. And despite the pruning, I think you can agree that the tree has survived. Here are some more recent photos taken last week when the sun was shining. So 6 months after the pruning, I think the tree is still flourishing. And quite honestly, I think it's going to outlive me and a lot of other people. So my question to urban forestry is the following. How can you show beyond a reasonable doubt that this Japanese plum tree has been permanently damaged or is dead? Where is the scientific proof? What structural integrity issues are visible to the naked eye? How long does it take to prove permanent damage? Is it weeks, months, years? And how can you prove that this tree won't recover or it hasn't recovered? So on April 7th, Public Works came out to prune the trees on the west side of the block. And when I asked the foreman about my tree, he said, it looks fine. The tree is not dead. So there you have it from a city employee. So in conclusion, I want to say that there's just lack of proof of permanent damage. Despite the improper pruning, the tree has survived. It's retained its structure. It doesn't have to be replaced or removed. There are no maintenance issues. And so why not issue a warning instead, consistent with your Susan's email? It's an unwarranted fine because the tree is clearly not dead. And so in closing, I just want to leave you with some close-ups of the tree to show that it survived. There's no permanent damage, and you're welcome to come out and see for yourself. Okay, done. Thank you, Cerise.
You, right on time.
You didn't time me?
Right on time.
Oh, right on time. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Ms. Chen, I had a
I love my
question.
tree.
Ms. Chen, I had a question for you.
Sure.
You said it's been pruned since 2000.
Daniel showed me the records because I wasn't able to pull it online. And I think it was last pruned in 2018 by Urban Forestry or somebody.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of your presentation you said it's been pruned since when?
It's been pruned throughout its 25 years, but I think the last time it was pruned was 2018.
Yeah, and every time it's been pruned, it's you or you hired someone prior
Yeah.
to the, okay.
Right.
And it's been pruned bare since,
Yeah, it's always been pruned. I mean, my memory doesn't go that far back, but I do want to say something. I live in the marina, and a lot of these gardeners, they're Hispanic, okay, and they work really, really, really hard. So in your prior hearing, somebody's called them bad apples. Well, these are really great gardeners, and perhaps they need to be educated on the topping of the trees, but you shouldn't find them, because that was sort of the indication from the last hearing, because they're really good people. And I'm sorry if the gardener didn't do a proper job, and the onus is really on me, the property owner, but I wasn't aware. So there you have it.
okay, but previously it's been topped and it's
Yeah.
grown back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay, I don't see any. And I don't have any other follow-up questions. I will close this item. And I will make my recommendations to the director. Next item. Hearing order 206635. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
So this is an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 298 Cordova, and the fine levied for illegal pruning is $2,230. So this is in our Arbutus Marina. It looks like it might have been topped in the past because you can see it has very poor structure. But then like 50% of the canopy had been removed, and this very large stub cut had occurred. And like I said, like these are entry points for decay. And this is a large diameter, very mature arbutus. So the amount of recovery that a tree like this has to do could very well shorten its lifespan. And so previously, people say like, well, how prove like it'll shorten its lifespan? There is an entire body of science in our boar culture. University studies, professors, PhDs doing studies on how pruning illegally shortens the lifespan of a tree. It's not made up. It's called the International Society of Arboriculture. And there are several scientific papers on how illegal pruning improperly shortens the lifespan of the tree. That's why these things exist. That's why it's the best management practice. That's why there's an American National Standards Institute that created the ANSI 300 in conjunction with the International Society of Arboriculture to create these pruning standards. We didn't just make them up. There's an entire body of science behind it. So that this is a very large stub cut, and structurally this tree, could have more failures due to the way it's pruned. There's not really like a way for this tree to recover other than to grow upward. And then there's not really any interior limb. So this causes what we call like a cantilever effect, where you have like a lot of end weight in the branches. And then the removal of this really large limb here is very damaging. So there's a really large stub cuts. Those are that creates an entryway for decay. And you can see that the tree was topped before, so like the remaining branches can barely take on the leader role for this tree. So this tree is pretty damaged over the years, and you can see there's even a little decay pocket in the front of the tree. So that's why we issued the fine for illegal pruning of 298 Cordova.
Thank you. May I have the property owner or its representative speak on this item? Mr. Lamb?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Would I be able to share my screen as well?
Yes.
Yes, just a moment.
Hi, everyone. Susan, Jane, Cerise, and the rest of the panelists, thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn more about, Street Tree SF and the wonderful program, as well as to come up with the different scenarios, with the PG&E thing, with the pruning schedule, and also giving us the opportunity to speak. I don't have a fancy presentation. I just want to speak from my heart and just kind of share kind of like our story. I think sometime in February, my mother-in-law over here, she looked at the tree and she noticed, the tree had discoloration, and it was also a lot of like ants coming up, and also like there were little holes in the leaves. And so she thought, without understanding, she doesn't really do technology, she doesn't speak English. So she thought it would be a good idea. Oh, let me just prune the tree, cut off the branch. Right, thinking that would actually save the tree, because she was like, oh, like it's not looking good. And during that time when she was actually pruning, there was a neighbor that came to talk to her, but she didn't know English, so all she did was smiling, yeah, and that was it. And I think the neighbor thought it was like, oh, I'm telling you not to do it, and you continue to do it with a smile. Thinking that she was doing it intentionally. So I just want to clarify, absolutely it's a mistake. I mean, especially after this education, I really appreciate actually the slideshow in the first half. I was like, wow, like it's great that we have this wonderful program. It was not her intention to damage the tree at all. And I hope you won't consider it as a gross negligence, because I think the definition of it is, the lack of slight diligence and or care. My mother-in-law is really here trying to care for the tree. She thought like, oh man, like there's a lot of bugs. Oh, there's things are like peeling, it's going wrong. I need to cut it. So she doesn't really know. And that's kind of like the story. And ever since she received the letter, it caught us by surprise because we weren't at home. We were working while she was pruning. When we got the letter, I was like, "No, you're not supposed to do that. More than 25% of the canopy is like not good for the tree." She's like, okay, like, no, never again. So she started trying to take care of the tree as much as possible. And this photo was taken 2 days ago. The tree is fuller, but I completely understand what Susan said about the other side, how it can be an entry point. I get that. And hold on, let me see. So just this peeling was actually there like before when we purchased the home. I think it was 2012 when we got the home. The tree was already looking kind of like that, but it kind of gotten worse with the peeling. So she was like, "Oh, something's wrong with the tree. What can we do?" So she just kind of decided to do her thing. So now this is the latest look of the tree, if you will. And I just want to kind of share our story. And again, I just want to say, like you said, we're from urban, we're from Hong Kong, and now living in SF. So we lack the education needed to really learn about how to best save the tree. And I just want to say, we appreciate this opportunity. We do really care about the tree, and we'll do everything in our power to maintain the lifespan and maintain the health of the tree if you give us the opportunity. And my mother-in-law over here, it's really, really sincere and just apologizing because we understand the great work you guys do, and we want to do everything we can to collaborate as opposed to like say any type of accusatory. We take responsibility, but at the same time, I want to express that we didn't know. We really didn't know. And I think our neighbor was trying to be helpful, but at the time she doesn't speak English. And so I think that's what's a miscommunication. So that's our story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any persons from the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, if there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendation to the director. The last item for today is hearing order 206636. May I have the department make its presentation? I think you're on mute, Susan.
My screen wouldn't let me. Okay. Can anybody see the presentation and hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So order 206636. It's 30 Chavez Avenue. Chavez Avenue. The appellant will have to correct me on the street name. So actually I'd never heard of this street before, but we got like an anonymous report about the pruning, which is why we issued the fine. And I know this fine seems like really large. The Board of Supervisors in February changed the ordinance to make illegal removals, not the standard in lieu fee, but but $10,000 per tree. So we our hands are kind of tied with like automatically issuing a $10,000 per tree for illegal removal specifically. The reason is because it's very hard to appraise a tree once it's gone. So the idea is that we're losing trees. So there's the Association of Trees and Landscape. I'm blanking a little on the name, but they do this tree appraisal. It's and you can kind of appraise the value of a tree based on its size, its species, etc. But you can't really appraise a tree once it's gone. So the Board of Supervisors changed the ordinance to this, which is why like you're gonna probably start seeing this like hefty number. So in its appeal for the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal removal of 2 street trees adjacent to 30 Chavez Avenue, and the fine levied for the illegal removal is $20,000. It's $10,000 per tree. So there's 2 Maytens, and so like we did not see the trees beforehand, and so like it is hard to assess the condition of these trees, but they did exist before. Then they were reported to have gone missing, and when we went by, the trees were completely gone. So we really had no choice but to issue the fine for illegal removal. We didn't really receive any sort of correspondence before the fine was issued about these trees going missing. So, you know, as far as we know, a permit wasn't obtained, and there was construction at the site, so the trees were also not protected. And so to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, we issued the fine for illegal removal of 2 street trees. I'd like to point out that the sidewalk we don't plant trees in narrow sidewalks like this. I believe the right of way would probably be, we'd have to look this up, but the right of way probably extends past the sidewalk into the setback. So any replacement tree would need to be back there. Because the ordinance was also changed to that $10,000 fine, they also made it so that we have to have replacements for like equivalent to the DBH. So the census recorded that these trees were 5 inches in diameter. And then the Board of Supervisors wrote into our ordinance that the diameter 6 inches above the ground will be equal to or greater than the total number of diameter street trees that will be removed. So basically there's 2 5-inch trees, 10 inches in total diameter were removed. So the ordinance now mandates that about 10 inches total in diameter get replaced. So we are still working through the kinks on how to actually achieve that, because that could end up being a lot of trees. And a lot of trees can't be replaced, you know, that densely due to infrastructure and site constraints. But the other alternative is maybe to plant some large box trees. So we're going to have to work on that aspect. But that is now the law, and so we're going to be required to then require the applicant to replace with a certain number of trees. So I just wanted to be very clear about that. So that ends our presentation for 30 Chavez.
To clarify, so the total number of trees will need to equal 10 inches in diameter.
Yeah, so basically like, it's very interesting because so there's 2 trees that are each 5 inches. So if they're able to source like 3.5 inch trees or something like that, that would be like the mitigation, and that's not even including the fine amount. So but we're gonna also like talk to the director on how like this mitigation makes sense, because there may be infrastructure conflicts that like there may not be room for 5 2-inch trees. But yeah, the total number of diameter needs to like add up to what was there before, and this is just what the Board of Supervisors put in the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. May I have the property owner or representative make its presentation? I think it's Mr. and Mrs. Lyson.
Hi,
Hi.
can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to put a presentation up. I emailed the PowerPoint yesterday, so I don't know if that's
Sure.
Do you have?
Just one moment and I'll
Sure.
promote you.
Thank
And
you.
then you'll need to unmute again, okay?
Sure. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see my computer?
No, you'll need to put your camera on.
I'm sorry, hello?
You'll need to put your camera on
Start video, okay.
and then share screen. Yes, we
Where's-
can see you now.
You can see my screen?
I
can
can
see the
see you. And then if you hit share screen, then you'll be able to show your presentation.
Where do you do that?
Yeah, we don't see
The
it.
share
At
screen.
the
button
bottom, there's a
Thank you.
green.
You might have to move your mouse towards the bottom of the screen for,
or the top sometimes.
Yeah, right here, this. No.
Thank you, Susan. Susan, take over talking for me.
It's,
I can't.
I'm gonna
I'm
stop my
sorry.
video to make sure nobody's bandwidth goes out, but, so at the bottom of the Zoom window, there's a green button that says, it should be in the middle. If
It
you're, in-
says chat participation, raise hand, settings, more, leave, stop video, mute.
Hmm. Are you in full screen mode?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, maybe exit full screen and then there should be a share screen button.
okay, exit full screen. Yeah,
What about it?
I don't see it. I did a PowerPoint presentation that I emailed yesterday.
Okay,
Um,
let me find it and then.
That's okay. You know what? I think we can talk without it and I can refer to it and maybe we can include that in the, to the
notes
for
that
the
we-
notes for the hearing. I don't have time to go over it. I didn't know we were gonna only have 3 minutes, so I can just start now with the discussion if that's okay. Is that good?
yeah,
Can
that's
everyone
fine.
hear?
That's
Okay.
good.
Okay. So I want to first off thank you guys for having us and letting us tell our side of the story. We were very shocked when we got this fine. You know, we've had these trees on our property for probably over 40 years, 35, 40 years. We spent a lot of time and energy dealing with these trees in terms of fixing them, maintaining them, and we are big tree advocates. We wanted nothing more than to keep both of these trees in their spot. It's kind of a thing that's been there for a long time. We're doing construction on the house and we wanted to keep them. I've had dealings with the urban forest in the past at a house in 2020 where I was trying to save trees in front of it that we own on Lisette Street. And I dealt with Susan and Madeline. And I've also talked about this house with Madeline on site at Lisette. And she mentioned that the urban forest at that time in 2020 was so backed up. There was nothing that they could be doing to help deal with my trees at Chavez, and that the pruning schedule was the schedule and there was no way that we could change that. And it is what it is. So I'm going to start with what happened with the trees and how we got to this point. I know my contractor sent a letter along with our landscaper sending a letter talking about the tree and the issues that we've had with the trees and where they currently sat before they actually fell. What happened is both of these trees are on a 6-foot wide sidewalk. So they are out of code and you were not able to walk by them while carrying anything in your hand or pushing a stroller or carrying a little kid. I have twin boys who are 4 years old. It was a constant nuisance to walk down the street because of that. And that's because these trees were kind of grandfathered in. So I wanted to keep the trees. We all tried to keep the trees. And what happened was on both sides of our sidewalk, our driveway, we were doing construction and there's utilities. On one side is a sewer line that my contractor wrote about them repairing. And on the other side is a PG&E gas line. In that PG&E gas line and in the sewer line, there are branches going in there. But more importantly is when they started taking up the sidewalk, they didn't think anything was going to happen to the trees and they didn't plan on doing anything to the trees. So that's why there was no construction permit giving or anything like that. But when the sidewalk was taken up and they started noticing the root system going crazy on a sidewalk that wasn't meant for that, the trees started to tip and fall. And what happened is they fell over where the construction work where they were doing. And we didn't really have much option for this. I think that it's been pretty clear by my presentation that hopefully gets included in this, in the letters from our landscaper who came to the site and looked at the trees, and our arborist who came to the
30
site, looked at the
seconds.
trees, and also from the construction people that we weren't trying to do anything to this tree. There was no reason for the construction for it. So, you know, we've had a lot of permits. And we actually tried with 311 to call the city in 2017 after a man hit his head. And we have a case number for that, which is 8175952, which I followed up multiple times with the urban forest. And at no point did they get back to me to deal with the situation or help me try to solve the situation in terms of the trees leaning. And for me, the trees and the sidewalk is buckling, and the trees were being overgrown and they weren't being maintained. And because of the area being a 6-foot width sidewalk and not the standard 9-foot sidewalk, it was not up to code according to 810B number 1. And we have no problem putting trees on our property in our front lawn where it is. I have no problem putting 10 or in the backyard. A tree is a tree, and we have no problem doing that. I welcome it. I want to put trees on my property. I'm a big believer in trees. I'm a big advocate. And this property has shown that by us having those trees there for so many years.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question.
Sure.
When did you report that case again?
I reported this case after a man hit his head and fell and started bleeding in 2017. And I have the case number. And
Okay.
my neighbor, who I think it might be even on this call, they said they wanted to be on there. They can attest to this. You know, I have neighbors up and down the street that were also saying these trees are a nuisance, you know, and I said, well, I reported them. There's not much I can do. I want to keep the trees. I'm a
And
big,
to note, they're the only trees on the entire block on the sidewalk because the sidewalk is not wide enough to support large trees. So-
yeah. And it's not even it's wide enough. It's not up to ADA code. I mean, it's not, it's a violation. So to me, when I got a letter back saying that, well, you need to plant these trees in the spot again,
And $20,000.
and it's a $20,000 fine, I feel like that you're asking me to do something that's illegal. You know, we're doing remodel in the house, and I just want to point out one last thing. I've had to put sprinklers in my house and do a lot of other things to bring it up to code. So I've had to spend a lot of money to bring it up to code. So when I get this letter about trees saying that I got cut down, that I did not cut down, and they're asking me to do something that's not up to code, that's pretty discouraging to me, you know?
Understood. When the trees, so the sidewalk was removed, right?
Correct.
For the, I guess, utility work.
Correct.
And then the trees started tipping. Was it a slow tilt, or did it just fall
You know,
over?
I wasn't on site. My contractor was on site, and he provided a letter to them saying what was happening.
Uh-huh.
And basically, I think what happened was they took the concrete out. They assumed that they were just tilting, as you can see in the picture, and that my neighbors can attest to, and even my the letters that were given. And what happened was they kind of like started doing their work. And I don't know exactly when it happened. My understanding was in the next couple hours it started tilting and it just snapped because the tree had not been maintained, as you can see from the pictures. I mean, I'm going to be honest
The root
with you.
system is not strong enough.
I'm a little scared to maintain the trees based on seeing the fines and everything, and especially the situation I had before in 2020 with my neighbor trying to take them out, which I'd mentioned that we dealt with the urban forest. So I've really tried to stay away from this and warn the city of the issues with these trees and people getting hurt. So when they did fall, my contractor was like, well, we need to do the work around these utilities. And I know PG&E won't let us do this in your sewer line, you know, as the letters show, you know, so we need to do it. So, I mean, I have no problem putting trees on my property that is not on a sidewalk that's too small for it, that's being squished. I mean, this is a perfect example to me of why this law is in effect, because the sidewalk is too small for these trees, and the trees started to become a hazard for everyone. And I'm more than welcome to put 2 trees with 10 diameters anywhere in our front or backyard on our property.
Understood. So just to clarify, that trees tipped over and fell the same day that the sidewalk was removed.
Well, within the same time period of when the sidewalk was taken out. I don't know I wasn't there, but when they were working on the utilities on both sides, correct.
Okay.
And we did not plan for that. So, I mean, the
Correct.
construction, we didn't have a construction plan because that wasn't planned for. And the trees have been in there for so long that we wanted to keep them. So we weren't trying to even do anything around the trees. They just, again, that's why I think that the rule 810B1 is in effect, because those trees are squished, or in effect because those trees are in an area that's too tight for it. It's not comparable for the tree.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you for your time, Mr. and Mrs.
Thank you very
Lyson,
much for
right?
your time. I appreciate you. Lyson, yes,
Lyson. Great.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean, were you able to see that I pulled up their presentation?
Yes,
Okay,
We're happy to email it to anybody else who needs to have it.
we have a
No.
copy. We will make
Okay.
sure that Jean also we have
Okay.
the letter that your contractor sent, and we have this, so we'll make sure that it gets put into the
And
file.
I
And-
also want to make sure that our arborist and landscaper also sent an email
Yeah,
last night.
that you
a
responded
letter
to.
That you responded
Yeah.
to. So there's 3 documents that we provided in support of our case.
Okay, great.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Cerise will make sure that Jean has all those and that they're part of the official record.
What about them?
thank you.
They're not
Stop.
on there.
I
Okay,
think there
right
might,
now, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? I see, is it Mr. McDevitt?
Hello. Hi.
Hi,
Yes, my name's Terry McDevitt. I'm a neighbor up the block from 30 Chavez. And I also worked for 4 years in the city street tree division, as it was called back in the 70s, and another 40 years as a tree trimmer gardener for the city. And I've watched this situation since the trees were planted. And as I see it, DPW made a mistake from the beginning because they violated their own ordinance about the width of the sidewalk, creating a narrow sidewalk. They also made a mistake with the type of tree, which we were constantly taking out trees like this that broke sidewalks and everything back in the 70s because it was, they made a mistake with the choice of trees. So as the license made this, not a pure decision, but as these trees were removed, basically what they did was they alleviated the liabilities and violations of ordinances that was created by DPW. And DPW seemed to be unable or unwilling to answer and come out and take care of it because they had asked them for a couple of years to come out and take a look at least. They never did. At one point, I think the license, what they did, in essence, in eventually taking these trees out, protected their own liabilities and the safety of their neighbors. And to ask them to put a tree back in the same place and recreate the same, potential liabilities and unsafe situations, it's hypocrisy. It's not, putting an oppressive fine like this on people is not going to promote putting trees in. It's going to make people be very reticent to plant another tree. But he wants to mitigate by at least planting in his landscape a tree of some sort, which sounds to me okay. When I was working for DPW, we would have recommended taking these trees out anyway, considering what they had done. They were into the sewer line, they're into the gas line. We would have immediately said, take them out when I was working for the department before. And buckling the sidewalk. The sidewalk was a tripping hazard for years due to the roots, the invasive roots of the maytens, which is absolutely the wrong tree to put in a situation like this.
okay. Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Miss Enderlane?
Yes, my name is Marlene Enderline, and I'm the neighbor at 20 Chavez Avenue. And, I'm a tree lover as well, but I'm also work in the health care industry for 40 years. And I'm, an advocate for the public safety and well-being. And the trees were leaning well before, they fell. And, I think that, we have a lot of very young families in the neighborhood, and when they can no longer walk on the pushing strollers down the sidewalk and have to go into the street or cross the street, I think that's a really dangerous situation. And we also have elderly who walk with canes, and I'm 5'5", and if I have to stoop in order to pass by that tree, I think that's a dangerous situation for all the pedestrians that walk down our street. So I think I love trees. I respect the trees, but I also have to be an advocate for the public. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on this item? Okay, seeing that there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item.
Gene, I'd like to
And-
clarify one thing
Yes.
is we're not asking and did not want to ask that the trees be placed back at the curb. What I want to show is that the public right of way is 11 feet. And we would be requesting that the trees be placed in the right of way, but back of sidewalk, because we agree we are not going to be planting trees in 6-foot sidewalks. We grandfather the trees in because many trees can survive in the 6-foot sidewalks. We're not going to arbitrarily remove trees just because they don't fit in that ADA rule, and that additionally that rule was put in place in 2013. A lot of these trees are planted well before that, which is why we grandfather them in. But whenever a tree gets removed, we do not ask that they get planted in a 6-foot sidewalk. We put them back of sidewalk. So I just want to make sure that that's clear that we're not asking that.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. and Mrs. J. Lyson.
Just wanted to add one point that in the letter, it did not state that. And I think that more of the point of it is that that's what caused the issue, is that they were in this location. That not necessarily that we're asking, that they're forcing us to plant it back, but that's kind of what the letter, the way I read it and everyone in my family read it, but that the trees being in this situation caused the issue, which caused them to fall by not being maintained, as kind of Terry mentioned. So I understand, and I want to work with the department to make sure that there are trees on our property to replace the trees that did unfortunately fall, but the situation and the neglect of the trees is what caused it. So I just want to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. That concludes the hearing. This hearing is now closed. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.